Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of Kopi Chats. Kopi Chats, which is coffee for those of you not from Southeast Asia. We're going to talk about some news from in and around my part of the world here in Southeast Asia. If you're new here, check out the show notes in the description where you can skip ahead, to the any timestamp for any topic that interests you. Or you can, like the rest of us regular, sit back, relax, go through all the interesting stuff fit to talk about on the internet. So today, welcome back to a new week, and have I got stuff for you? Ukrainian President Zelensky calls Russian troops murderers. Murderers, I say, murderers. Outrage grows over war crimes, as reported on Channel News Asia. So what does it say? Ukraine's President Zelensky called Russian troops murderers, torturers, rapists, and looters after dozens of bodies were found near Kiev, triggering global outrage. If by now you have not yet heard that there's been a substantial amount of fake news floating around during this war, now is the right time to learn about it. And allow me to fill you in. So I've already covered many instances of reported news that later turned out to be not true. And here you have something so calibrated, so designed to emotionally hit you that you can't help but feel this, deep, irresistible anger towards Vladimir Putin and Russia in general, isn't it? Yet, do we have any evidence? Because before we accept the claim, isn't it rather necessary to have some evidence? Look at this. Despite Russian denials of responsibility, condemnation was swift. Okay. Zelensky was unsparing, right? Concentrated evil has come to our land. Is that the words of somebody, a man who is trying to, tell you the truth about something? Or somebody who's trying to maximize your outrage and your anger, right? To dial it up to 11, right? Doesn't that strike you as a little odd? Zelensky said he has created a special body to investigate killings. So he wants to investigate those killings, yes? The scale of killing is still being pieced together, but Ukrainian Prosecutor General said that 410 civilian bodies have been recovered so far. That's a lot. Now, bear in mind, this might be entirely true. This might totally be true. But I hope you see, right, that the President Zelensky's speech is designed to maximize your outrage. And before the prosecutor has investigated anything, President Zelensky wants you to know that he is very confident and he knows for a fact, and he thinks that these are Russian atrocities are, unconscionable. And he's not the only one. Check it out. France's President Macron says that a new round of sanctions is needed, as that there were clear indications Russia was responsible for the killing of civilians. Wow. This is what he says. There are very clear clues pointing to war crimes. It is more or less established that the Russian army is responsible. So is it more or is it less? Right? So again, I don't know. Do you know? No idea. We have, we would not expect to be lied to on this, except that maybe we would. Because look at this, okay? Here, there's more. Germany says West agreed to agree more sanctions on Russia after Bucha killings. Germany said on Sunday that the West would agree to impose more sanctions. Putin and supporters will feel the consequences, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz said in a statement. Right. And now, after reading the statements from Ukraine, France, and Germany, finally we get to what does Russia say? Right, they're accused of this terrible crime, yet the earlier pieces did not even make an attempt to at least find out what is it that the other side is claiming. Would you call that balanced? No, not at all, right? But at least we have this. So credit to Channel News Asia for attempting to tell us at least the other side. So Russia's Foreign Ministry said that footage of dead civilians had been ordered by United States as part of a plot to blame Russia. Who are the masters of provocation? Of course, the US and NATO. Wow. Any evidence? I don't think any were offered. The Russian Defense Ministry said that the images were another staged performance by the Kiev regime. Wow, so the accusations fly, and can you know what the truth is in this case? Unfortunately, no. We have no way of knowing. It could very well be either of these things. Would you put it past the US and the Ukraine to stage a horrific episode like that? I mean, they don't have to actually kill anybody. Plenty of people died. You might just, for example, empty out the mortuary in Kiev, because I'm sure there are lots of dead bodies that have just accumulated over all these weeks. You take them to a field, you can put them all there. Maybe it was close to a Russian position that was there formerly, and then you could have people accidentally discover them later on. It's possible. I'm not saying that's what happened, but it's possible. It is also possible that the Russians did exactly this to punish, intimidate the local population. It's possible. It's possible. Again, can't tell. Now, here is something very important to note. So here's a well-known journalist. I respect him a lot. Rahim Kassam. He received a notice from Google Ad Manager, which is a Google tool for publishers of websites to manage their Google ads. And that's how they make money, right? You show ads from the Google network and you get paid for showing those ads. He received the following notice. Google says it will demonetize websites which report Ukrainian government attacks on its own citizens. Wow. And look at the highlighted part here. It says, claims that, let's see, sorry. The first paragraph says, we will pause monetization of content that exploits, dismisses, or condones the war. The final paragraph states, this pause includes, but is not limited to, claims that victims are responsible for their own tragedy or similar instances of victim blaming, such as claims that Ukraine is committing genocide or deliberately attacking its own citizens. So you're not allowed to say that, regardless of whether it's true. Note that the statement is quite clear that you cannot claim or imply that victims are responsible for their own tragedy. You cannot do victim blaming, regardless of whether or not the Ukrainian authorities are in fact responsible for any kind of any of these kind of actions. Doesn't that strike you? That it's very one-sided. You're only allowed to, you can say everything favorable to Ukraine up to and including lies. But if you try to say anything that may contradict that, even if it's truthful, it would be denied. Now, bear in mind that, of course, we have no way of knowing what's true and what's false coming out of a war zone. But if we had a way to know, we wouldn't be allowed to say it. I mean, if Ukraine was doing terrible things, we would not be allowed to say it. That is context against which we have to try to understand, this environment that we're trying to comprehend, right? We're trying to see through. It's a tough one. It's a tough one. Okay, I'm done with my Ukraine-Russia for the day. Let me take you to something else. China's Ukraine war stance raises awkward questions on territorial integrity, says Singapore's Prime Minister, Mr. Lee Hsien Loong. Mr. Lee was in Singapore last week, and he was speaking at a dialogue session organized by the New York-based Council on Foreign Relations. He says, for China, the war presents them with awkward questions because it violates the principles which Chinese hold very dear: territorial integrity, sovereignty, and non-interference. Keep that in mind. It'll be important later. So, Mr. Lee is standing up for territorial integrity, sovereignty, and non-interference because Singapore has already joined the United States and many other countries to impose sanctions on Russia. And the authorities of Singapore have stated that this is a principled stand that they are taking. A principled stand, right? And some of these principles, he's now talking about China, namely that China hold these principles very dear. The Chinese media also reported on Mr. Lee's visit to the United States. Now, I don't do this often, but I'm going to show you the Global Times, which I think it's fair to say this is state-run Chinese media, so don't expect it to be fair and, objective. But here it is. Biden peddles an Indo-Pacific strategy to Singapore's Lee, but ASEAN members aware that the US is targeting China. Yes, indeed. I think we all know that. So the implication here is that, Mr. Lee was enduring an unpleasant sales pitch from Mr. Biden to have to listen to his Indo-Pacific strategy. But the ASEAN, Southeast Asian member countries are aware that the US is targeting China, and they will surely dismiss and disregard, this blatant manipulation. US President Joe Biden told Lee Hsien Loong that the Indo-Pacific remains a strategic focus of the US. But during the meeting, Mr. Lee avoided using the Indo-Pacific term, which is widely believed to be coined by the US to contain China. Tuesday was the original date for US-ASEAN summit, which had been postponed, right? So, anyway, yes, we don't need to go into detail. The point is that the United States is interested to, and Joe Biden in particular, is interested to bring Southeast Asian countries on board on their side for their Indo-Pacific strategy. And of course, part of that would be to counter the influence of China, to promote the interests of the United States. Of course, right? So it'll be up to individual countries to sort that out. But China is aware of the visit, and I don't think they make any mention of Mr. Lee's comments about, what the Chinese hold dear and the awkward questions posed. Let me see. Have I looked for the word awkward? Does that appear? Not at all. It does not appear in this article. So they avoided that topic entirely. The Prime Minister's Office of Singapore did have a press release on the dialogue that Mr. Lee had with the Council on Foreign Relations. You can see here the backdrop, Council on Foreign Relations. It's a fairly long transcript. You can see here it's conducted with Dr. Richard Haas, President of the Council on Foreign Relations. Now, if you are a big political news junkie like me, you might want to visit this website. It's the Prime Minister's Office of Singapore government. You can easily look it up. Just Google something like, Singapore Prime Minister, Council on Foreign Relations. And then, you'll definitely see the transcript. Now, if you are wondering, what exactly is this Council on Foreign Relations? Please allow me to say something about it. Now, Mr. Lee was in the United States to visit, on an official visit, and he spoke to Joe Biden. Now, thereafter, he took time out to speak to the Council on Foreign Relations. Why them? Right? I think that's a fair question, because if you're visiting, You could, for instance, you have options. You have options. You have many people, more potential meetings to have than time available. You don't have enough time. You could be talking to Singaporeans in Washington, D.C., which is where he happened to be. You could have a dinner with Singapore citizens. You could have dinner with, say, the Singapore U.S. Chamber of Commerce, for instance, right? Business leaders. But instead, Mr. Lee went to speak to the Council on Foreign Relations. And what is the Council on Foreign Relations, you might ask? Well, I prepared a little bit of material. Here you go. This, as you can see, FP over here in the upper left, that is Foreign Policy magazine, highly respected magazine about foreign policy. Now, it says here in a quote about the Iraq War, instead of becoming marginalized within the Beltway scene, which is Washington, D.C., the neocons or neoconservatives who drove America over the brink in 2003 into war continued to be supported by an array of well-funded think tanks, magazines, and letterhead organizations, including the Weekly Standard, American Enterprise Institute, Carnegie Endowment, Council on Foreign Relations, and so on. If someone can screw up as repeatedly as Elliot Abrams and still land a well-funded senior fellowship at the Council on Foreign Relations, then bad advice will continue to enjoy a prominent place in American policy discourse. So, Foreign Policy magazine, pulling no punches with regards to neocons or neoconservatives and the Council on Foreign Relations. It says here, these guys were wrong about every aspect of Iraq. Why do we still have to listen to them? So this should give you a taste of who exactly these Council on Foreign Relations people are. They are pro-war, pro-America, clearly, and have been spectacularly wrong on some important questions of foreign policy. Why was Mr. Lee speaking to them? Because he's the Prime Minister. His time is very important. He would be expected to speak to the most important people that he needs to meet on his trips. His trips are, of course, carefully scheduled. You have to meet with the most important people to your country. Why would it be a think tank, right? A non-governmental organization? Why would the head of state of Singapore give a speech to them? I don't know, honestly. I don't understand this at all. Maybe his team, or maybe he knows people there. Maybe they have made promises. I have no idea. And I don't want to get into any trouble. I don't even know enough to avoid any trouble. I don't to get into the trouble. But I can tell you a little bit, I can at least tell you what the Council on Foreign Relations is about. So here's another one. Somebody wrote a book, academic, Mr. what's his name? Lawrence Shoup. He wrote a book called Wall Street's Think Tank, the Council on Foreign Relations and the Empire of Neoliberal Geopolitics. A lot of jargon there, but suffice to say, here, I found this interesting. So this is a book summary, summarizing the headings, subheadings, what the book's about, and here we go. In part 2, the CFR's worldview, grand strategy, and tactics. The Council on Foreign Relations is above all the place where the ruling capitalist class, together with its professional class allies, develop the grand strategy and tactics of creating empire, the United States' global hegemony. Okay, I'm not going to go any further, but you can see how it's viewed, right, by authors, books, and Foreign Policy magazine. Isn't that interesting? And the person who interviewed Mr. Lee is Richard Haas, the president of the Council on Foreign Relations. You would get, you can't get anybody less important to interview the Prime Minister of the nation of Singapore. Of course, you would get somebody properly, reflective of that importance of the occasion, like Mr. Haas, right? Now, let me give you some extracts, highlights of Mr. Haas's tweets. Okay? Check this out. In response to somebody else's tweet, Mr. Haas was saying, sorry, Bill, but the short answer is no. The principal aim of US foreign policy should be to shape the foreign policy of others. That's what I wanted to share. Do you agree with this? Do you think that, oh, maybe you think like, of course, you know, every country wants to do that. Yeah, I suppose so. I suppose, you know, maybe. Another valid one would be, well, foreign, you know, principal aim would be to establish, you know, mutually beneficial relationships. But no, Mr. Haas's position is that the principal aim, the number one aim of US foreign policy would be to shape the foreign policy of others. Does that not make the hosting of Mr. Lee a little bit more uncomfortable for you? Aren't you shifting in your seat a little bit now? With Mr. Haas there, you know, in part of an organization that's said to represent the capitalist class, you know, the rich and powerful. And let's move on a little bit. Well, maybe Mr. Haas, you know, he rubs shoulders with the elite. He must be a, you know, really smart guy. It's really smart to associate with him somehow. So here he is, right, tweeting about the U.S. and North Korean summit attended by Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un. The summits were bound to fail as Donald Trump badly overestimated what North Korea would agree to. The issue was or is the U.S. willingness to accept an outcome short of total denuclearization. All or nothing foreign policy of North Korea, Iran, and China trade risk producing nothing or conflict. Strong words, Mr. Haas. Another one. Donald Trump's decision to exit Syria, draw down in Afghanistan, and ignore North Korea's failure to denuclearize raises odds China will act more assertively in South China Sea and versus Taiwan. Russia versus Ukraine or a NATO country. Deterrence far stronger when based on certainty rather than uncertainty. Let's take stock. What has happened with these places? Is Syria? I don't know. It's pretty quiet. Afghanistan seemed to be okay while, you know, there was a drawdown of troops under the Trump administration. No violence. Not a single U.S. serviceman killed, apparently. You could Google it. As I recall, the Trump administration was quite proud of the fact that no U.S. military servicemen were killed in like the past couple of years of his administration. Ignore North Korea. Richard Haas says that they failed to denuclearize. However, we note that there were no missile tests while Trump was president. But if you were paying attention, you will notice that there have been missile tests recently. You can see here. Because why is that? Well, I guess the Trump foreign policy with North Korea worked, while the one that we have now does not work. And he's saying that this raises odds China to act more assertively in South China Sea versus Taiwan, Russia versus Ukraine or NATO country. What has happened in these instances? China, South China Sea, Taiwan, Russia, and Ukraine. Well, China's been flying her jets close to Taiwan, and Russia has invaded Ukraine. So I don't know how Mr. Haas sees that the Trump years were bad, you know, for foreign policy. One last tweet. North Korea talks tanking less because of China than North Korea. Also, North Korea talks are tanking not because of China, but because of North Korea and US policy, which ruled out these Iran-style pacts. Worse, Donald Trump got next to nothing in Singapore, but claimed he got it all, setting US up to fail. Well, Mr. Haas clearly thinks that, you know, few years of no missile tests, very quiet, you know, peace is a failure. Whereas, I suppose, he thinks that we're in a better spot now. I don't know. All right, do you think that is a failure? You can tell me in the comments. I will reply. I promise you. I don't think so. All right, so we have had missile test, and that's not a good thing. Also, lately there's been a lot of talk about how people need to be more savvy towards, fake news or manipulative news. Don't be fooled by those WhatsApp forwarded messages, right? Trust the authoritative, respected, credible news institutions. But here's something that may have escaped your notice. In the same week that Mr. Lee was visiting the United States, Joe Biden has been thrown under the bus by, on or around, it's around the same time, shall we say. Hunter Biden's emails are genuine, reported by The Times of the UK. This was reported on March 21st, saying that the New York Times now admits that Hunter Biden's emails from a laptop which had lost were genuine, and the emails are extremely controversial. Now, handsome Mr. Hunter Biden here is actually quite a drug addict, and there are numerous photographs on the laptop of him in his underwear with alleged prostitutes, smoking alleged drugs, and with alleged emails, making alleged deals with alleged Ukrainian billionaires, oligarchs, some say, and Chinese businessmen. Now, you may think like, Waylene, you're talking nonsense. You're talking out of your butt, because there's clearly not the case. Come on, it's all been debunked. Well, the New York Times now says that the emails are genuine. I trust the Times to report some things accurately. And here you have the Washington Post saying, oh, we analyzed and confirmed the veracity of thousands of emails. So the New York Times and Washington Post have confirmed that the laptop exists, the contents are real. The one thing that they haven't done is to discuss what exactly the contents were. So that is still left to your own curiosity to search and discover. I advise not to use Google because you'll have a hard time trying to find the actual emails if you use Google. Try something else. Now, I'm going to stop there. So you may notice that though this was just reported on March 30th, barely a few days ago, and it certainly did not crop up in Southeast Asian media. I can tell you because I'm a news junkie. I check it every day. It didn't appear. But now you know. Moving on though. Okay, so enough about that. Suffice to say, if it's something that isn't very pleasant to Mr. Biden, it probably won't appear in Southeast Asian media. It's a great chance. So it's totally reasonable if you think that, it sounds like there's a great chance that the Southeast Asian countries will be, on the side of the United States in any, alliance or any partnerships in relation to China. Yes, of course, because it seems that at least in English-speaking media, still broadly pro-US, less so about China. Now, coming back to China, and especially in relation to what Mr. Lee was saying earlier about territorial integrity and non-interference. So, China has signed a security pact with the very, very small nation of the Solomon Islands, as reported on the newspaper. What is this? The Australian. So the security agreement between Solomon Islands and China, so savagely defended by the Prime Minister of Solomon Islands this week, represents unequivocal failure for Australian policy. It is a bad, perhaps disastrous development for our security. Now, if you don't know where the Solomon Islands are, they are very close to Australia, off on the northeastern side of Australia. right? So if you look at a map, it will be the upper right side. That's the Solomon Islands, and it's quite close to Australia. And if the Solomon Islands signs a security treaty with China, of course, Australia would be extremely nervous, because if China has a partnership with our Solomon Islands where they can refuel their ships, maybe store their ammunition, it is quite a disaster for Australia. Yeah, Australia's intelligence agencies have known for years that Beijing, has an ambition to establish a military base in the South Pacific. The Chinese are all over the South Pacific. Beijing's embassy in Fiji is one of the most imposing buildings in Suva. I presume that's the capital of Fiji. And it's reported, everywhere. The Jakarta Post reports also China Solomon Islands agree controversial security pact. Controversial because Australia is extremely nervous about it. Western allies feared will pave the way for the first Chinese military foothold in the South Pacific. And of course, the Solomon Islands authorities, the president at least, feels that this is absurd. This is our right to partner with whoever we want. And yet at the same time, doesn't this contradict somewhat what we're told the Chinese value? So you see, the Singapore Prime Minister, Mr. Lee, he's an experienced statesman with decades of he has spent decades working as Prime Minister, and he, more than anyone else, would know what his biggest, one of Singapore's biggest trading partners, most important international partners wants. And he views that they value principles such as territorial integrity, sovereignty, and non-interference. Territorial integrity and sovereignty, they claim these, and they say the same over Taiwan. That is, it's ours, don't challenge us, and don't interfere. And also they say we don't interfere. And then right now, though, they're signing the security pact with Solomon Islands, which Australia views an interference in their backyard, which it really is, right? It really is. If China can say, don't do military exercise with Taiwan because we see it as part of our territory, or in our sphere of influence. Okay, maybe they say that it's part of our country, so you really cannot be involved with that. But also, I find it difficult to imagine that China would accept if the United States, say, put some missiles in Vietnam, which is bordering China. So it's not just it's not just the unquestionable principle of non-interference, right? There are instances when you would interfere if your interests are threatened, and that is exactly what Australia feels here. But China has gone on the offensive. Here reported in Daily Mail of the UK that China calls this disrespectful colonialism. They compare it to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, as it lashes out at calls for an invasion. So there was a small Australian news outlet that raised the idea of invasion of the Solomon Islands because of this deal, saying that we absolutely cannot accept it, and we must do everything possible to prevent it from happening. Right? So things are getting really well, at least in the diplomatic arena, things are getting really spicy, shall we say. China signing a security deal with Solomon Islands. They claim that it's not like the Chinese will build a military base. I think the president of Solomon Islands has clarified that. And there's Australian media that is claiming, let me see, can I find it here? yeah, Beijing was incensed by a fringe independent article calling on Canberra to invade the Solomon Islands over its new security arrangement with China. Right. Although the call for regime change only came from one former gold trader who now writes his own economic publication, Chinese state media, totally, how should I say this? Went totally nuclear and said the claim exposed Australia's hysterical and ugly face. Well, it wasn't an official, Australian government paper or anything, but okay, seems a bit of an overreaction. I hesitated to use the word overreaction because calling for invasion is quite serious, isn't it? But still, the article makes very clear, it's a fringe independent article written by a former gold trader. He's writing for his own publication. It's not like I'm so big and I have so many staff and we wrote a big editorial and millions of people read it. Yeah, not really. So that was pretty interesting. What will happen? What will happen? Most likely nothing will happen. Nothing will happen. It seems that so it's just rather amusing. China, in their pursuit of influence and stability, their own security, seems that they're refraining from criticizing Russia, even though we know that as Prime Minister Lee of Singapore correctly pointed out, hey, you've always been about sovereignty, territorial integrity, non-interference, and yet here you are, you're turning a blind eye to one country invading another sovereignty, and then while you proclaim non-interference, right in Australia's backyard, you sign a security agreement. Isn't that odd? You should know that this would make the Australians really angry and violates your principle of non-interference. So it's rightly called out by Prime Minister Lee, but the Chinese state-run media conveniently ignore that. They don't really place too much stock in that. But I guess you and I know, and that's enough for us, isn't it? Okay, that's all the material I have prepared for you today. I hope you enjoyed this little chat, at least as much as I enjoyed delivering it. It seems like there's always something interesting going on in the world, and I hope you come back again so that we can talk more about these kind of things. Leave a like if you think I earned it. Leave a comment to tell me if there's any way that I can earn the like or subscription. Yeah. In the meantime, though, I know that your day is already better for having heard this little presentation. I hope that now you can go back go back home, go back to work, go for dinner, go for a coffee, whatever it is, satisfied because you got your fix for the day. It's like a thing that you got to do. It's like if you're not going to the gym and feeling very uncomfortable, yeah, there's some things that you just have to do, and getting your news fix is one of them when you're a huge news junkie, as I know you are. All right, thank you everybody. I'll talk to you again soon, maybe tomorrow. Take care. Bye bye.